The day my wife told me to leave my own house, she stood in the doorway, with her arms crossed and said, 6 words that nearly destroyed me. You'll never be anything without me. For a moment I just stared at her, not because I didn't hear her, because after 12 years of marriage, I couldn't believe those words had come from the woman I once loved more than anyone in the world. Monica Coleman wasn't always like this. When we met, she believed in me. Back then we were both broke. We lived in a tiny apartment with stained carpets and a refrigerator that rattled so loudly at night it sounded like it might explode. We laughed about it. We dreamed together. We talked about the future as if it were already ours. But somewhere along the way, something changed. Or maybe success changed what she wanted. The more she spent time around wealthy friends, luxury homes, and social media perfection, the less satisfied she became with the life we had built. Nothing I did was enough anymore. Not the long hours, not the sacrifices, not the fact that I never missed a bill payment, not the fact that I came home every night, not the fact that I loved her. Every conversation eventually became an argument. Every argument became a reminder of what I supposedly lacked. You're too comfortable. You don't think big enough. You should be further along by now. You're wasting your potential. At first I tried to reason with her. I told myself she was stressed. I told myself marriage had seasons. I told myself things would get better. But they didn't. They got worse. Much worse. One evening, I came home after a 12-hour workday. The house was unusually quiet. Monica sat at the dining table. A stack of papers rested in front of her. I knew what they were before I even got close. Divorce papers. My stomach dropped. Monica. Her face showed no emotion. I'm done, Darius. The words hit harder than I expected. Done with what? With this marriage. With us. With waiting for you to become someone. The room felt smaller. You can't be serious. I'm very serious. I pulled out a chair and sat down. Can we at least talk about this? We've been talking for years. No, I said quietly. We've been arguing for years. For a brief moment, something flickered in her eyes. Doubt. Regret. Maybe even sadness. Then it disappeared. I've already made my decision. I looked down at the papers. My hands trembled. Not from anger. From heartbreak. Because despite everything, I still loved her. That was the worst part. I still loved someone who had already stopped loving me. 3 weeks later, the divorce was finalized. It happened faster than I thought possible. The woman who once promised to spend her life with me couldn't wait to end it. The house stayed with her. Most of the furniture stayed with her. Even several mutual friends quietly chose her side. Apparently, success was easier to support than loyalty. The day I moved out, I packed my belongings into the back of an aging pickup truck. Everything I owned fit into a few boxes. 12 years of marriage reduced to cardboard containers. I carried the final box toward the truck. Monica stood on the front porch watching. She didn't offer to help. She didn't offer a goodbye. She simply stood there, observing, as if I were a stranger. Before I climbed into the driver's seat, she spoke. You know what your problem is? I looked at her. You dream too much. Then she smiled. The smile hurt more than the words. Because it wasn't a smile of kindness. It was a smile of victory. She believed she had escaped a sinking ship. What she didn't know was that I was already building something. Something I had spent years working on quietly. Something I never talked about because I didn't want promises. I wanted proof. But at that moment, even I wasn't sure it would work. So I drove away. Alone. The apartment I rented was barely larger than a hotel room. The kitchen was small. The walls were thin. The furniture came from thrift stores and clearance sales. Every morning I woke up to silence. Every night I returned to silence. The loneliness was brutal. People talk about divorce like it's a legal process. It isn't. It's a funeral. Except the person you're grieving is still alive. Months passed. The depression came in waves. Some days I couldn't focus. Some days I barely slept. Some days I sat in the dark wondering how everything had fallen apart so quickly. Meanwhile, Monica seemed to be doing just fine. Social media made sure everyone knew it. Luxury restaurants, weekend trips, designer clothes, perfect photos, perfect captions, perfect life. At least that's what it looked like. Then Trevor Banks appeared. I first heard about him through mutual friends. Successful businessman, luxury cars, expensive watches, confident smile. Everything Monica claimed she wanted. Within weeks, they were everywhere together. Within months, they looked inseparable. I'd be lying if I said it didn't hurt. It did. More than I wanted to admit. Not because I wanted Monica back, but because 12 years seemed to have been erased overnight, as if our entire marriage had never mattered. One evening, an old friend called me. After a few minutes of small talk, he hesitated. "There's something you should know." I already knew I wouldn't like what came next. "What is it?" He sighed. "Monica was talking about you." I laughed bitterly. "That narrows it down. She told people you'll never amount to anything." The words stung, even though they shouldn't have, even though I expected them. There was something painful about hearing them repeated out loud. Karma. After we hung up, I sat alone in my apartment. The city lights glowed through the window. Cars moved below. Life continued. And for the first time in months, I stopped feeling sorry for myself. Because Monica wasn't entirely wrong, at least not yet. I hadn't become the man I wanted to be. I hadn't built the future I imagined. I hadn't proven anything, but maybe that was exactly what needed to change. That night I opened my laptop. Then I opened a folder. Inside was a project I had been quietly developing for nearly 3 years. Most people would have called it unrealistic. Some would have called it impossible. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. For months I worked harder than ever. Before work, after work, weekends, late nights, early mornings. Every spare minute went into the project. I stopped worrying about Monica. I stopped checking social media. I stopped caring about what people thought. The only thing that mattered was progress. One step, then another, then another. Weeks turned into months, and slowly things started moving. Small victories appeared. Tiny signs that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't chasing a fantasy. Then one rainy Thursday evening, everything changed. I was sitting alone at my kitchen table reviewing notes when my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. Normally, I would have ignored it. Something told me not to. I answered. "Hello?" The voice on the other end sounded professional, confident, important. "Is this Darius Coleman?" "Yes." There was a pause. Then the stranger said something that made my heart stop. "We've been reviewing your work, Mr. Coleman, and we'd like to discuss a very serious opportunity." My grip tightened around the phone. Every instinct told me this call could change my life. I just had no idea how much. And as the stranger continued speaking, I realized the future I thought I had lost might finally be about to begin. For several seconds after the call ended, I sat completely still. The phone remained in my hand. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it. I looked around my tiny apartment as if the walls themselves might confirm what had just happened. The investors were real. The opportunity was real. And for the first time in years, hope felt real too. I stood and paced across the room. Part of me wanted to celebrate. The other part was terrified. Because opportunities don't guarantee success. They only give you a chance. And chances can still be wasted. The following week I flew to meet the investors. I couldn't afford first class. I couldn't afford luxury hotels. In fact, I barely had enough savings to make the trip. But none of that mattered. What mattered was the presentation. For months I had refined every detail of my business concept. Every number, every projection, every strategy. I knew the project better than anyone. Still, as I entered the conference room that morning, my palms were sweating. 5 investors sat around a polished table. Their expressions were unreadable. One by one they introduced themselves. Then they asked me to begin. For nearly 2 hours I presented my vision. They challenged every assumption, questioned every calculation, examined every weakness. At times it felt less like a meeting and more like an interrogation, but I stayed calm. I answered every question. When the meeting finally ended, the lead investor closed his notebook. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then he smiled. A genuine smile, the first one I'd seen all day. "Mr. Coleman," he said, "this is one of the most impressive presentations we've reviewed this year." My chest tightened. He continued, "We believe your idea has enormous potential." I walked out of that building feeling lighter than I had in years. 2 weeks later, the investment agreement was finalized. The amount wasn't enough to make me rich. Not even close. But it was enough to build, enough to hire talent, enough to turn an idea into a company, enough to change my life. The next 12 months became the hardest period I had ever experienced. Most people imagine success as a straight line. It isn't. It's chaos. There were days when everything seemed perfect, and there were days when disaster waited around every corner. I worked 18-hour shifts, sometimes longer. My apartment became both office and home. The kitchen table became a workstation. The couch became a temporary bed. Coffee became a survival tool. I stopped counting weekends. I stopped caring about holidays. While other people relaxed, I worked. While other people slept, I worked. While other people doubted, I worked. Because failure was no longer an option. Not after everything I had sacrificed. Not after everything I had lost. The first major setback arrived 3 months later. One of our key software systems failed during testing. Weeks of progress vanished almost overnight. The team was devastated. One employee even suggested postponing the launch indefinitely. That night, everyone left the office discouraged. Everyone except me. I stayed until nearly sunrise reviewing solutions. When the team returned the next morning, I was still there, exhausted, unshaven, running on determination and caffeine. We're fixing it, I told them. Today. Something changed after that. The team stopped seeing me as a founder. They started seeing me as a leader, and together we solved the problem. Then another problem appeared. Then another. Then another. Each obstacle taught us something. Each failure made us stronger. Slowly, momentum began building. Customers arrived. Then more customers. Then more. For the first time, revenue started growing faster than expenses. The numbers finally moved in the right direction. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I worked even harder, because growth created new challenges, new expectations, new responsibilities. Every decision suddenly mattered. People depended on me. Employees depended on me. Their families depended on me. I carried that responsibility every single day. Meanwhile, life continued for Monica. Mutual acquaintances occasionally updated me. Not because I asked, because gossip travels quickly. Apparently, she and Trevor were inseparable. Luxury vacations, expensive restaurants, designer shopping trips. Social media couldn't get enough of them. Every photograph looked perfect. Every caption looked perfect. Every smile looked perfect. One evening, an old friend sent me a screenshot. It showed Monica standing beside Trevor at a charity event. Under the image was a quote attributed to her. "Sometimes leaving the wrong person opens the door to the right one." I stared at the screen, then I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it no longer hurt. Months earlier, those words would have crushed me. Now they felt irrelevant. For the first time since the divorce, I realized something important. I wasn't building my future to prove Monica wrong. I was building it because I deserved better than the life I had accepted. That realization changed everything. The business continued expanding. Our customer base doubled, then tripled. Industry publications started mentioning our company. Investors who previously ignored us began requesting meetings. Suddenly, people wanted my opinion, my advice, my time. The same type of people who once dismissed me now acted impressed. It was strange. Success hadn't changed who I was. It had only changed how others saw me. One afternoon, nearly a year after the divorce, my assistant rushed into my office. Her expression was unusually excited. "Darius, you need to see this." She handed me a tablet. An article from a major business publication filled the screen. The headline featured my company and my name. I read the article twice, then 3 times. Not because I doubted it, because I couldn't believe it. The company that had started at a tiny apartment kitchen table was now being discussed nationally. The article spread quickly. More interviews followed. More opportunities followed. More attention followed. The growth became impossible to ignore. Then came the email. At first I assumed it was spam. The sender belonged to one of the largest television networks in the country. I opened it, read it once, then again, then a third time. The message was simple. A nationally televised business program wanted me as a featured guest. They wanted to discuss my journey, my company, my success. For several moments I simply stared at the screen. A year earlier, my wife had thrown me out of our home because she believed I would never become anything. Now one of the biggest television networks in America wanted to put my story in front of millions of viewers. I leaned back in my chair, smiled, and accepted the invitation. What I didn't know was that somewhere across the city, Monica was about to see something that would completely change her world. And when that broadcast finally aired, neither she nor Trevor would be prepared for what appeared on their television screen. Success is a strange thing. For years, nobody notices your sacrifices. Nobody sees the sleepless nights. Nobody sees the failures. Nobody sees the moments when you almost quit. Then one day they see the result. And suddenly, everyone thinks it happened overnight. The investors who had called me 18 months earlier became my first major partners. What started as a small project inside a cramped apartment had grown into a rapidly expanding company. Within months, we hired employees. Within a year, we opened offices. Within 2 years, our technology was being used across the country. The same people who once ignored my phone calls suddenly wanted meetings. The same people who had doubted me suddenly called themselves supporters. I never forgot where I came from, and I never forgot who stayed silent when my life fell apart. Money changed my circumstances. It didn't change my memory. One afternoon, I stood in front of 300 employees during a company event. Looking across the room felt surreal. There had been a time when I wasn't sure I could afford groceries. Now hundreds of families depended on a company that had once existed only inside my imagination. The applause echoed through the auditorium. I smiled, not because of the success, because of the journey, because every painful step had brought me here. After the event ended, my assistant approached me. "You have another media request." I laughed. "Another one?" She nodded. National television this time. That got my attention. The network was one of the largest in the country. Millions of viewers. Primetime audience. The kind of opportunity most entrepreneurs dream about. A few weeks later, I found myself sitting backstage inside a television studio. Bright lights filled the room. Producers moved quickly between cameras. Technicians adjusted microphones. The host walked over and shook my hand. "We're excited to have you here." "Thank you. You've got an incredible story." I smiled politely. If only he knew. Most people thought the company was the story. The company wasn't the story. The story was surviving the years before the company existed. The story was getting back up after being told you weren't good enough. The story was believing in yourself when nobody else did. A producer counted down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The cameras went live. The audience applauded. The interview began. For nearly an hour, we discussed entrepreneurship, resilience, leadership, and failure. I spoke honestly. I talked about rejection. I talked about perseverance. I talked about refusing to quit when success seemed impossible. What I didn't mention was Monica. I wasn't interested in revenge. I wasn't interested in proving anything. That chapter of my life had already ended. Or so I thought. Across town, inside a luxurious modern living room, Monica Coleman was having a very different evening. She and Trevor sat together watching television after dinner. At least that had been the plan. Their relationship wasn't nearly as perfect as it appeared online. The expensive vacations had slowed. The luxury purchases had become less frequent. Arguments happened more often. Money problems had started creeping into conversations. Trevor was still flashy, still confident, still obsessed with appearances. But the cracks were beginning to show. Monica noticed them, even if she refused to admit it. That evening, she walked into the living room carrying a glass of orange juice. Trevor sat on the couch scrolling through his phone. The television played quietly in the background. Neither of them paid much attention. Then the host introduced the next guest. And now, joining us is one of the country's fastest-growing entrepreneurs. Monica froze. Something about the name sounded familiar. The camera shifted. The guest appeared on screen. A tailored navy blue suit, confident posture, relaxed smile, success written across every detail. The glass nearly slipped from Monica's hand. Her eyes widened. "No." Trevor looked up. "What?" She stared at the television. The color drained from her face. The glass finally fell. Orange juice splashed across the carpet. Neither of them noticed, because the man on the screen was me, Darius Coleman, the husband she had abandoned. The man she had called a failure. The man she had laughed at. For several seconds, the room remained completely silent. Trevor slowly stood. His expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. "That's your ex-husband?" Monica couldn't answer. The host continued speaking. "Whose company is now valued at over $80 million. Trevor's jaw dropped. Monica felt her knees weaken. $80 million. The number echoed inside her head. Again. And again. And again. She remembered every insult, every argument, every cruel comment, every moment she had dismissed my dreams. Suddenly those memories felt different. Much different. The interview continued. The audience laughed at my jokes. Karma. They applauded my achievements. They admired my story. Monica couldn't stop staring. She searched desperately for some explanation. Some reason why this couldn't be real. But it was real. Painfully real. The confident man speaking to millions of viewers was the same man she had. Forced out of their home. Only now everything had changed. The host smiled. Darius, what would you say to anyone who's been told they aren't good enough? I paused. The audience became silent. Then I answered, never let somebody else's opinion become your future. Monica felt those words hit like a punch, because deep down she knew they were meant for people exactly like her. People who stop believing, people who underestimate others, people who confuse temporary struggles with permanent failure. Trevor looked at her. For the first time all evening he seemed genuinely nervous. You never told me he was this successful. Monica swallowed hard. Because he wasn't. The answer sounded weak even to her. On television, the interview ended with a standing ovation. The audience rose to their feet. The host shook my hand. The crowd applauded louder than ever, and as the cameras slowly faded to commercial break, Monica realized something she never imagined possible. The man she had thrown away wasn't struggling anymore. The man she had abandoned wasn't surviving anymore. The man she had mocked had become one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the country. And in that moment, Monica Coleman understood the full weight of her mistake. Because she hadn't just lost a husband. She had lost the future she thought she was chasing. And for the first time since signing those divorce papers, genuine regret began to settle into her heart. The morning after the interview aired, my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Messages, emails, missed calls, interview requests, business inquiries, congratulations from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Success has a strange way of reminding forgotten people that you exist. I spent most of the day ignoring the noise and focusing on work. The company still needed leadership. The mission still mattered. The attention was flattering, but it wasn't the goal. Around noon, my assistant entered my office. You have another call. From who? She hesitated. Monica Coleman. For a moment I simply stared at her. I hadn't heard that name spoken in months. Maybe longer. The memories returned immediately. The divorce papers. The empty apartment. The night spent wondering whether she had been right about me. I took a slow breath. Send it to voicemail. My assistant nodded. A few minutes later, another call came. Then another. Then another. All from Monica. I ignored every one of them. That evening she sent an email. The subject line was simple. Can we talk? I deleted it. The next day another email arrived. And another the day after that. Soon there were text messages too. At first they were polite. Then emotional. Then desperate. Darius, please call me. I owe you an apology. I need to explain. Can we meet? Please. The strange thing was that I wasn't angry anymore. A year earlier those messages would have consumed my thoughts. Now they barely affected me. Because the opposite of love isn't hate. It's indifference. And for the first time in a long time I felt indifferent. 3 weeks passed. The messages continued. Then one Friday afternoon, something unexpected happened. My receptionist called upstairs. Mr. Coleman? Yes. There's someone here asking to see you. Who? A brief pause followed. Then she answered. Monica. The room became silent. I looked out the window overlooking the city skyline. Part of me considered refusing. Another part realized I didn't need to. I had spent too much of my life avoiding difficult conversations. Send her up. 10 minutes later, the office door opened. Monica stepped inside. For a second, neither of us spoke. She looked different. Not physically, emotionally. The confidence I remembered was gone. The arrogance had disappeared. Even the way she stood seemed smaller. Nervous. Uncertain. Human. I gestured toward the chair. Sit. She sat carefully. The silence stretched between us. Karma. Finally she spoke. You look good. I smiled politely. Thank you. Another silence. Then she looked around the office. The floor-to-ceiling windows. The awards. The photographs, the evidence of everything that had happened since our divorce. Tears began forming in her eyes. I saw the interview. I figured. She laughed softly. The sound carried more sadness than humor. You always were smarter than me. I didn't respond. Monica looked down at her hands. I don't even know where to start. The truth is usually a good place. She nodded. Then the words started pouring out. I'm sorry. I remained quiet. She continued. I was impatient. I was selfish. I stopped believing in you. The tears finally slipped down her cheeks. I convinced myself that success defined a person's worth. She shook her head. And when you weren't successful yet, I treated you like you never would be. For the first time since entering the room, she looked directly at me. I was wrong, Darius. The confession hung in the air. Raw. Honest. Painful. I believed her. That was the surprising part. I genuinely believed she regretted what happened. But regret doesn't reverse consequences. Regret doesn't rebuild trust. Regret doesn't erase choices. Monica swallowed hard. When I watched you on television, I realized something. What? She smiled sadly. I kept waiting for the future. I remained silent, and while I was busy chasing what I thought the future looked like, I threw away someone who was already building one. The room fell quiet again. Outside the window, traffic moved through the city streets below. Life continued, as it always does. Monica wiped her eyes. Do you think you could ever forgive me? I leaned back in my chair. The answer came easily. I already have. Her eyes widened. You have? Forgiveness isn't the hard part. Hope appeared on her face. Then I continued. Trust is. The hope faded, because she understood exactly what I meant. Forgiveness allowed me to move forward. Trust would have required moving backward, and I had no intention of doing that. I don't hate you, Monica. Her shoulders trembled. But the life we had ended the day you stopped believing in us. A tear rolled down her cheek. I know. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she stood. Slowly, reluctantly, as if she already knew the conversation was over. Before reaching the door, she turned around one final time. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I had stayed? I smiled. Not because the question amused me, because I had asked myself the same thing once, a long time ago, sometimes. And I looked out at the city, then back at her. If you had stayed, maybe we'd still be together. She waited, but that's not the lesson. What is? I took a deep breath. The lesson is that people shouldn't have to become successful before they deserve support. The tears returned immediately, because she knew I was right. Everyone loves the finished story. Very few people believe in the unfinished chapter. Monica nodded slowly. Then she opened the door and walked away. For good. As the door closed behind her, I felt something unexpected. Peace. Not victory, not revenge. Peace. Because the greatest success wasn't the company. It wasn't the money. It wasn't the television interviews. The greatest success was becoming the man I needed to be without allowing bitterness to define me. A year earlier, I had driven away from my old house believing my life was falling apart. In reality, it was beginning. And the woman who once told me I would never be anything without her had unknowingly given me the opportunity to discover exactly who I could become on my own. Sometimes the people who walk away from your life aren't the end of your story. They're simply the beginning of the chapter where you finally learn your worth. And that chapter changed everything. This story delivers an important lesson about patience, loyalty, and personal growth. One of its central messages is that a person's current circumstances do not determine their future potential. Many people are judged during their struggles rather than supported through them. Yet success often comes after years of unseen effort, sacrifice, and perseverance. The story also highlights the danger of valuing people solely based on money, status, or outward achievements. Monica's mistake was not simply leaving her marriage. It was losing faith in someone because his success had not arrived yet. Viewers can learn the importance of believing in long-term goals, maintaining resilience during difficult seasons, and refusing to let criticism define their future. The story further teaches that true success is not revenge, wealth, or public recognition, but developing character, self-respect, and inner peace. Finally, it encourages audiences to support loved ones during their journey, because the greatest opportunities are often hidden inside unfinished chapters that others fail to appreciate.